the spirit of 1.8 million West Virginians wills you to victory. Other places have pro teams, but in this state, the Mountaineers are a way of life.
When I competed and wore that number, I competed for the state and for the people, not just for the university.
Now, let's roll out the carpet and bring on the Mountaineers. Pitts on a spree. Yes!
Alexander. Robinson comes forward. It's a dunk right at his face. Send it in, Joe! Butler into the lane, into traffic. It goes again! West Virginia has won its first Big East championship.
So long, Big Blue. Hello, Golden Blue. The West Virginia Mountaineers are going to the Final Four.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into episode 1 of the 2022-2023 edition of the CRW Hoops podcast. I'll be your host today, Jordan Cruz. Typically, Steven will be your main man here leading the CRW Hoops podcast as we talk about some West Virginia basketball, but he had a prior engagement, so you're stuck with me for this one as we kick off, I guess I should say tip off rather, trying to switch over from the football lingo to the basketball side here, but get ready to tip off the Mountaineer basketball season in less than a week now. November 7th will be the first game of the 2022-2023 men's basketball season. We'll take on Mount St. Mary's there in the Coliseum at 7 o'clock p.m. And then, of course, the Backyard Brawl coming up quickly, the basketball edition there for the second game of the season. So here, what we want to do with our first episode of the season is just kind of give a little brief season preview. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down the roster, kind of talk about the new players. There's a lot of new faces for the Mountaineers this season. And so if you're listening on the audio side, I'm actually doing this live on our YouTube. So if you're listening on the audio side, you're hearing the playback. But if you're watching on the playback on our YouTube or on the WV Sports Now YouTube, as we're part of their network there in the Sports Now family of networks, we appreciate you tuning in that way too, but be sure and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified in the future when we do go live, like we are sometimes impromptu, like we are for this stream. We plan to go live plenty this season with Mountaineer basketball content, going to do some post-game live streams and things like that. So roughly just to kind of let you know, our plan for basketball season is hopefully to do post-game live streams for almost every basketball game immediately following the game, and then podcast-wise, that's a little bit more for the video side. Podcast-wise, for you guys on the audio side, we will be doing at least one episode a week talking about the games that have occurred, the games that are coming up that week for the Mountaineer basketball team. So that's a little bit of our plan here for this upcoming season. But for this episode, as I am live here on the Country Roads Webcast, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, if you are in here, just please go ahead, drop your questions, comments, concerns about the upcoming WV basketball season in the chat. I'll address them as I go here throughout if anything pops up. But in the meantime, I just kind of want to briefly touch on, the upcoming season and the players that we'll be seeing suit up for the Mountaineers this upcoming basketball season. So, like I said, the first game will be November 7th against Mount St. Mary's. Then you go on the road for the Backyard Brawl against Pitt. Then a couple more non-con games against Morehead State and Penn. And after that, that's when the non-conference schedule gets pretty tough for the Mountaineers. I know they also have the Phil Knight Classic tournament they're going to be playing in as well. That's got a lot of tough teams in it. So the Mountaineers really going to have some tough matchups in the non-conference. And we know the Big 12 conference is one of the toughest conferences in college basketball. In my opinion, it is the very toughest conference in college basketball. But that being said, a lot of new faces for the Mountaineers this season. So what I want to do is I want to go through the roster here a little bit, and we'll go through it player by player. I'm going to try and pull it up and share my screen with you here, and we'll go through the roster together for you guys that are watching the video side on the YouTube. If you're on the audio side, no worries. I know you won't have the visual effect, but I'm going to detail everything here as I speak as well. Let me just see if I can get this pulled up for you guys. All righty, here we are. Okay, so we've got an alphabetical order here, just the way they have it on the university site. Starting off right here with number 15, Jimmy Bell Jr., 6'2", 285-pound forward. He's a senior guy they got, from JUCO there, as you can see, Moberly Area Community College out there in Arizona. He's originally from Michigan. But this guy is a big guy. I mean, you see he's 285, so that's good size for a basketball player already. But he's actually lost 75 pounds, since he got to Morgantown, going through the off-season conditioning programs, the workout programs, lost 75 pounds. He was a guy that was up over 300 pounds at one point. He was going to maybe possibly be a football player. So he was a, offensive line recruit for football. That's why he had bulked up so big to, 300 plus pounds, over 350. And so gets to Morgantown, loses 75 pounds and has found himself entrenched. He's probably going to be the starting, man there in the middle for the Mountaineers, playing the 5 position this season that you will see has been that thus far through the 2 scrimmages the Mountaineers have played against Dayton and Bowling Green. So great size there, and hopefully good things from him. The Mountaineers are expecting him to be, a rim protector and to, clean the glass for them as they look to be improved rebounding the ball this year. Moving along here, one of the freshmen here, West Virginia has 2 freshmen. We'll actually talk about them back to back, and funny enough, both named Josiah. This one here, the first one we'll talk about, is the guard Josiah, and that is a 6'3", 195-pound guard to be exact. He is actually from Canada originally, as you see there, Ontario, coming though from Taze Valley in West Virginia. So, in-state recruit, Canadian formerly, but, ended up now an in-state recruit for the Mountaineers as he signs. And, Bob Huggins said they plan to play these freshmen, so I don't know how soon we'll see him, but we'll see him at some point this season, I'm sure. Probably, some of these early non-conference games, get him some action, get his feet wet and see where he's at before you shorten the bench a little bit when you get ready and get a little bit closer to conference play. Then moving along, we're here. The next freshman, as I said, also named Josiah, saw him do some good things in the Mountaineers scrimmage against Bowling Green. If you got a chance to watch that or listen to Tony Caridi's call, came in and had a really smooth stroke, hit 2 threes for the Mountaineers and looked really good doing so. Got great size, as you see here. He'll be playing forward for the Mountaineers this season. 6'7", 200-pound guy out of Canton, Ohio there. Where the Hall of Fame is there in Canton. So, but 6'7" guy, looks like he's got a great stroke. So I expect to see him. I think he seems to me, just to the naked eye anyway, like he's a little bit more ready than Josiah Davis to be able to play faster. Not that they both won't contribute this season, but I think Josiah Harris is more ready-made to get on the court early in his Mountaineer career. Then, of course, Kedrian Johnson, the super senior, utilizing his 5th year, 6'3", 185. We all know Keedy last season was really great defensively. This season may be asked to score a little bit. I know the Mountaineers have added a lot of good players that can help them defensively and help them with rebounding, something the Mountaineers have struggled with in the past couple of seasons, but they're going to need to find ways to score in with that and find some guys to score the basketball. So Keedy may be asked to do a little bit more scoring, but I think he will continue his defensive ways and hopefully has even improved to be even better at that on-ball defense that he proved to be, pretty good at for the most part of last season. And then Kobe Johnson, we saw as a true freshman last season, get a lot of playing time and do some good things. He's back this season and will be able to he's transitioning over, won't be playing point guard for the Mountaineers, playing more of a 2 guard, which is more of his natural position, according to Coach Huggins, the 6'3", 210-pounder, also from Canton, Ohio, there. And, we know what he can do. And I think he's going to be a guy that can score for the Mountaineers this season as well. And, was doing a good job hitting the glass as well in the scrimmage against Bowling Green. And then Jamel King is a sophomore, going to be a sophomore for the Mountaineers. Just missed out on the red shirt, got in some action there late last season. But he's been known to be a shooter. That's what the reports have been. We haven't really seen him as much as we saw some of the other true freshmen last season. But 6'7", 215-pound guy that I think can really help the Mountaineers this season. As I said, they're going to need some guys that can score the basketball for them. So hopefully he's one that'll be able to do so. And I think he's a guy with a good stroke, as the Mountaineers will need some shooters on this team. And then, of course, another super senior we talked about, one before with Keedy Johnson. Now you got Emmett Matthews Jr. coming back to WVU, transferred out 2 seasons ago, spent last season playing for the Washington Huskies, back in his home state of Tacoma, of Washington, where he's from, there in Tacoma, Washington. So comes back to Morgantown to finish out his career, and I think he's going to be asked to be one of the team leaders for the Mountaineers. Mountaineers, like I say, are going to need some scoring, so he's going to be doing a little bit of that. And I think hopefully this time around, he has really, I don't want to say perfected, but improved his shooting stroke. He seems to be shooting the three ball a lot better this go around in Morgantown. And I think with some of the players the Mountaineers have and some of the depth they have at the 4 and 5 position, Emmett Matthews, you'll be seeing him play more of the 3 this year than you have in the past. I know in the starting lineup the Mountaineers have put out in these 2 scrimmages, he was actually at the 4. But I think you will see him play the 3 a lot this season. I think you'll see, guys that we'll talk about later on this list, Trey Mitchell, who we're about to talk about, who hasn't got to play yet, will be, in there. Okonkwo will factor in, Waggy. The list goes on of guys that can play the 4. So Matthews has a chance to play more of the 3 this time. And I think that benefits his game a little bit more, but I think he's going to do whatever Coach Huggins needs him to. So I know before he was number 11, he's going to be wearing number 1 this season, as you see there. Moving right along through the roster here. Another senior the Mountaineers have. This one's a transfer. Last season the Mountaineers got some transfers from lower level programs. That didn't work. So this year they went a different route and have brought in some Power 5 transfers that I think are really going to help them. And one of them that may be the most talented of those transfers, arguably, is Trey Mitchell, the transfer from Texas. He's injured right now, hasn't practiced yet since he came to the Mountaineers, but the Mountaineers are hoping to see him, get in the action before too long. Huggins sounds optimistic about it. So hopefully, before 2022 is out, we'll get to see him get some action before, conference play kicks up for the Mountaineers. He'll be wearing number 3 this season, originally from Pittsburgh. And this is a guy that I think can contribute a lot for the Mountaineers. I think he's a good scorer on offense, and then he can, help you on the glass and defensively as well. Moving along, another forward here, 6'8", 240, great size. Huggins said last season, that he felt like if he would have had the opportunity to play more, he would have been the best rebounder the Mountaineers have. Came, from the prep school there in Beckley, but he's actually originally from England, and that's James Okonkwo. And he's a guy that the Mountaineers are super high on. You see great size there, 6'8", 240. But he's also, got good ball skills. He can dribble the basketball, apparently, from what we've heard about him. Maybe arguably the most athletic player on the Mountaineers team, and supposed to be really good on the glass. Something we've heard a lot about. A lot of these big men that the Mountaineers have brought in. So something to be excited about there. And can pop over here real quick, check the chat. Don't see anything in there yet. But like I said, if you guys are in here tuned in and you got any thoughts on the WU basketball team, any questions as we run down the roster here in the season preview episode, go ahead, drop those in the comments there. I'll address them as I go throughout. If not, run through the roster, hit a couple news topics, and get on up out of here for episode 1 here of the CRW Hoops podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll have plenty more about your basketball content as we go throughout. If you're in here on the video side, hit the like button for us. That'll help this video's performance, help future videos performances as well. And hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. And then if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast there, which you can find on any podcast platform, if you're listening on Apple Podcast, though, specifically, leave us a rating. That really helps us there on that platform, which helps us across all podcast platforms. So, but if you are in here watching this live, go ahead, drop a question in the chat, comment, concern, anything you got concerning Mountaineer basketball. We'll address it here as we progress through episode 1 of the CRW Hoops podcast, 2022-2023 edition. But continuing our rundown of the roster here, next up we got Eric Stevenson, who is a transfer, a bit of a journeyman, played at multiple schools. He was at Wichita State a few years ago, then at South Carolina most recently before transferring to the Mountaineers. As I said, the Mountaineers going into the transfer portal and getting some more Power 5 transfers. Eric Stevenson's a guy they're looking at to probably be the leading scorer on this team. And I think if you watch the Bowling Green scrimmage, that was kind of evident. 18 points in that scrimmage to be, a really big bright spot. Of course, you can flip that over to the other side of the coin. I believe he had 6 turnovers as well. So that's something that you can't have. You have to cut down on. But hopefully that's just an anomaly and not something that continues to progress. But you can tell this guy's just a player that's got really good basketball IQ. I think he's going to be a fan favorite this season. He's personally looking like the potential to be my favorite player on this team. I already got a nice little nickname. They're calling him Arm Sleeve E Steve. Love it. Wearing number 10 for the Mountaineers, like I said, 6'4", 205. Going to be a starting two guard, another super senior, and he's a player that's got a lot of potential, really good shooter, excellent at the free throw line, over 90%, and I think brings great defensive pedigree and good on-ball defenses, which I think you can say about all the transfers that WV brought in guard-wise, just as you can say the players that WV brought in, 4 and 5 position-wise are good on rebounding and defense as well. I think that's the one thing I'm excited about this team is it looks more like the type of Bob Huggins teams that we're used to seeing, whereas it seemed like the past 2 or 3 years he was kind of trying to get out of his wheelhouse, go with a more scoring team. And I don't think he liked the results as, us as fans probably didn't either. And so it looks like he's getting back to more a little bit of his roots with this team. But I think there are some guys that can score the basketball, and I believe Eric Stevenson here is one you will see that has the potential to be the leading scorer for the Mountaineers this season, and definitely, one of up there for sure. And then moving along, we got another forward that the Mountaineers brought in from the JUCO ranks, and that's Pat Sumnick. The Mountaineers have had a couple players injured that haven't had a chance to participate yet. We talked about one of those already being Trey Mitchell. The other one of those here is Patrick Sumnick, 6'8", 230-pound forward, going to be wearing number 24 for the Mountaineers when he gets the chance to get back on the floor. I believe he's dealing with a knee injury. He's originally from Green Bay, Wisconsin, coming to the Mountaineers from Triton College. Heard good things about him. Can't really tell you too much. I haven't, watched his highlights or anything like that. I've just gone off of hearsay from what I've heard. And, that's that he's a good rebounder. And I think that's, like I said, that seems consistent with a lot of the big men the Mountaineers brought in, including one we'll talk about moving here in the future. But hopefully somebody gets back and can help the Mountaineers and get some experience early in this season before the Mountaineers hit the grind of conference play and the tough Big 12. And then another guard the Mountaineers brought in, a transfer, going to be a senior, originally from the Bronx, New York, which you love to see. Coach Huggins has had great success with those New York players, those tough guys, and a lot of us were wanting us to get back to some of those roots that we saw, especially when you think of that Final Four team. A lot of those guys were, New York, New Jersey guys. And the Mountaineers brought one in, and Joe Toussaint, the 6'1", 190 guard, going to be wearing number 5 for the Mountaineers this season. And like I said, another Power 5 transfer coming to the Mountaineers from Iowa, known for his defense. And I think similarly to Keedy Johnson, may be asked to score a little bit more for the Mountaineers this season. And I think he has that capability. He showed against Bowling Green. He had a 3-point jumper and looked good in the mid-range. Has the ability to attack, the rim, as I think a lot of these guards do, including Eric Stevenson, who we just talked about. But in regards to Toussaint, I think he's really great on-ball defender. He's not starting for the Mountaineers currently. He hasn't in the scrimmages. Maybe somebody they want to bring off the bench for a spark, but he also has the potential to wind up as a starter, I believe, in the future for the Mountaineers. And something else that I've heard, I think, you saw it in spots, the Mountaineers press a little bit against Bowling Green. And I think it's not going to be press Virginia or anything by any means. We're not getting completely back to that, but I think they are going to press in spots. They're going to extend the man-to-man defense out, make teams start their offense out, near half court, past half court. And, try and just be a nuisance, like I said, get back to more of that Huggins type style. But one thing that I have heard coming out of, the practices and stuff prior to the start of this season is that if Joe Toussaint and Keedy Johnson get on the floor together, they can really wreak havoc. And, I've heard that the way it was put to me was think about, Daxter Miles and Javon Carter type havoc. So I think, when you do see the Mountaineers press, don't be surprised if it's when Toussaint and Keedy Johnson are on the floor together. I know Coach Huggins has said, though, that he's kind of scared to play them together too much because he doesn't want them both to get into foul trouble and, be down 2 guards, that, 2 of your point guards, because he's trying not to make guys that are more fit to play 2 guard have to play point guard this season, trying to really stick with, Toussaint and Keedy there at the point guard position, among some others. But I think that when those two are on the floor defensively, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this season for the Mountaineers. So a lot of excitement behind Toussaint as well. And then a lot of excitement behind this JUCO transfer. The Mountaineers, like I said, they went to the Power 5 for the transfer portal players. And then as far as the other recruits, it was a lot of JUCOs. And this one right here may be the most talented of the JUCOs, arguably. I know Jimmy Bell's the starter. Looks like this guy's going to come off the bench, but he is going to be an absolute monster on the glass. I'm really excited to watch this player play this season, and that is Mohamed Waggy, number 11 for the Mountaineers. Going to be, you'll see him wearing that this season, and he's coming in at 6'2", 225 pounds, another New York guy from the Bronx. So you get that New York toughness. He's only a sophomore, so get him for a few years. Like I said, coming from the JUCO ranks from Harcum College, and all you heard about him was he's a straight glass cleaner. He's great on the offensive boards, particularly even. And I think when we seen him get it in the scrimmages, we saw just that. I don't know for sure if he led the Mountaineers in rebounding, but from just watching the game, not looking at the stats right now off the top of my head, he was the one I saw grabbing the most boards, it seemed like, and particularly, like I said, on the offensive glass, getting putbacks and stuff. So I don't know if he'll come off the bench all season. I think he's a guy that's got the potential to start at the 4 position, particularly when Trey Mitchell's out, if they don't continue to start Emmett Matthews there. I like Waggy a lot, but like I said, that's another guy that could also bring you a spark off the bench. So I don't, question them bringing him off the bench either. But I do think he has the talent and the potential to be a starter. And if not this season, he definitely will in the future for the Mountaineers. But watch out for him cleaning the glass this season. And he's another one of my favorites from the players that I've seen thus far from the Mountaineers and players that I've heard about. And then moving to the last player here on our list, here's a guy that really came on last year as a true freshman. I think a lot of people were clamoring for him to get more playing time last season. He kind of seemed to be one of the best shooters that the Mountaineers showcased, at times, particularly from behind the arc. When he got hot, he was really filling it up at times. And, we seen him put up, mid to high point totals a lot and not a lot of minutes. So we'll see if he can improve upon that and continue to show to be a scorer, because as I said, that's the one thing it looks like this team is getting back to more Bob Huggins roots. But in turn with that, the one thing we've seen from those Huggins style teams is great on defense, great on rebounding, great at forcing turnovers, but they also go on these scoring droughts. And, sometimes you just need somebody to make a play and bring you out of that drought and get you back into rhythm where you can, start scoring, see the ball go through the hoop and start scoring again. Sometimes that's all it takes. And sometimes you just need one guy to be able to do that. And Seth Wilson, I think, is a guy that has the potential to be that guy for you. And, only a sophomore has potential to have a bright West Virginia career as well. Another guy from Ohio, as you see a few of those on this roster. Changed his number this season, going to be wearing number 14. I believe he was number 45 prior to. Wearing 14 this season, 6'1", 215-pounder. So that's kind of a look at your roster for the Mountaineers. But didn't want to fail to mention, let me stop sharing this with you guys real quick. Get back up here on the screen with you. But one thing I forgot to mention, of course, or didn't want to fail to mention anyways, in this episode is that the Mountaineers in the past couple of days did actually add a transfer as well from Manhattan that is committed. Don't believe he's actually signed the letter of intent yet, so you don't have the official announcement from the university. But Jose Perez, here he's a guard. He's played at a couple other schools, Gardner Webb, and I want to say Marquette maybe as well. But most recently at Manhattan, led them in scoring last year, I believe, 18 points a game. He's a scorer that's not really a shooter. I think he only shot 25% from 3 or something like that. So not really a shooting type scorer, but a guy that can get to the line, draw some fouls, and get to the rim and just get his shot mid-range and close to the basket. Kind of think of Teddy Allen type of scoring is the way that I've heard it described for this guy named Jose Perez is his name, but he's going to be coming in for the Mountaineers as a guard. He's going to be eligible for this season at some point. I believe from what I've heard, the Mountaineers are going to try and petition to get him eligible immediately once he gets on campus, hopefully for as soon as, the first or second game of the season. But typically guys wouldn't be eligible until the next semester. So, he wouldn't be eligible until, January, February, March, however that works after the first of the year. So if anything, you will see him then, but the Mountaineers trying to get him eligible prior to then. And you add one more face to this roster. So the roster that we see in the first, few games of the season for the Mountaineers won't necessarily be the same faces you'll see by the end of the season. Because, like I said, Pat Sumnick, who knows how long he's going to be out. And same goes for Trey Mitchell, who's going to come back for the Mountaineers at some point, the Texas transfer, and be a big factor on this team. And then, of course, we'll see what happens with Jose Perez, who the Mountaineers just added. WVU Fan 23 here in the chat. Appreciate you jumping in and chiming in. Always good to see and hear from you. As we love our members here in the Country Roads Webcast community, our friends. And WVU Fan 23, definitely one of our friends here of the Country Roads Webcast. He asked, is the St. Mary's game going to be televised televised by anyone. Let me look here if it's got anything listed as I pull it up here on the schedule. I don't think it's got a network listed on the preview yet. Let me see. It's loading up here. ESPN Plus. It's actually going to be on ESPN Plus according to this. So if you got ESPN Plus, you can catch it there. Hopefully somebody you know has ESPN Plus. Maybe they'll be kind enough to lend you their login information, and that could help you out there in that situation. If you don't have ESPN Plus, I know it kind of stinks. Actually, the football game this Saturday coming up is going to be on ESPN Plus as well against Iowa State. Not a fan of them being on ESPN Plus myself either, but at least they're on television. Typically, some of those games wouldn't have been televised. Now, at least with ESPN Plus, you have the ability to watch them, with a subscription, or if you know somebody that has the subscription, they could help you out, or you can go over to their house, anything like that. But then, of course, I always like to say, Tony Caridi's calls better than most of the television announcers anyway, so that's always a good option as well. But WVN 23 Mount St. Mary's game will be televised on ESPN Plus. So first Mountaineer basketball game of the season coming up less than a week now, November 7th, 7 p.m. tip time against Mount St. Mary's, and it can be on ESPN Plus if you want to watch it. Of course, you can catch Tony Caridi on the radio, which you can find on the WVU Sports app, Varsity Network app, and then, of course, WVUsports.com. They'll have it there online as well. Appreciate the question, WVU Fan 23. Anyone else has any questions, of course, feel free to drop them in the chat there before we get out of here. I'm going to touch on, a couple more news points that I wanted to touch on here before we wrap up episode 1 of the CRW Hoops podcast, the 2022-2023 season preview edition. And the main one, of course, is some news that's actually broke today. Nothing official, but it's coming from Pete Thamel and some, reliable sources that typically once it comes from those guys, it's not long before it breaks as official. To me, it kind of just means that I guess the ink's not dry on the contracts, or maybe they haven't exactly signed on the dotted line yet, but almost seems imminent when it comes from a guy like Pete Thamel. And that is that Gonzaga is actually going to potentially be joining the Big 12 conference. So, yeah, I didn't see that one coming. Actually, I guess maybe it's just me, but typically when I'm thinking conference realignment, football is actually on the forefront of my mind. So when they were talking about adding West Coast teams, Gonzaga actually never really entered my brain. And I want to shout out to Coos, our friend over at Coos's Corner there on YouTube. I'm sure most of you already know him, but if you're listening on the audio side, you don't, get over there and sub him up as well. But he actually, I think, 3 months ago, I think it was when the video was, don't want to say predicted this, but definitely, mentioned this would be a good idea for the Big 12 to try and go out and get a team like Gonzaga for the basketball side of the conference. And, the Big 12, as I said earlier in this episode already, may be considered the toughest conference in college basketball. So if adding Gonzaga, there's absolutely no doubt that you're the toughest conference in basketball, because it's only barely arguable now, maybe with the ACC and, some other teams that have. But I think top to bottom, the Big 12's way deeper basketball-wise. And if you add Gonzaga, it's going to be, very interesting for sure. Silas, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here in the chat as well. If I can get my mouse to cooperate, I'll pull up your comment here. He says Gonzaga to the Big 12 would be fun to have them in the Coliseum. Yeah, it's crazy, perfect timing. I just now, wanted to touch on that. The reports coming out that the Big 12 the Big 12 conference is in talks to add Gonzaga for, basketball. Of course, Gonzaga doesn't have, a football program. So of course this would be a move for basketball, but I think that means that announcement on football moves are probably, forthcoming as well, maybe potentially adding more, West Coast teams on that side as well. And as bad as, I think the one thing that we've hated about the Big 12 conference has been the travel. And this, of course, doesn't help that in any way, shape, or form, of course, makes it harder. But, at least it's only one team right now on the basketball side of things that's way out there on the West Coast and that you would have to travel to, once a year. But they also, have to travel here. It's actually going to be a little bit harder on Gonzaga travel-wise, I would think. But even having said that, I'm not against the Big 12 adding these West Coast schools like Gonzaga, here in basketball, and if they choose to do so in football as well, because I think right now it's just all about stability, being stable, and staying in it when you got these what looks to be super conferences forming. You want to have a seat at the table. I think for West Virginia, that's what's most important, is to remain having a seat at the table. And if the Big 12 continues to improve and expand and build upon what they already have, and you're in the Big 12 firmly, you don't have to worry about anything. So I think that's the one plus side we need to think about. I know there's plenty of other negatives to talk about, but I'm certainly not against it competition wise. The Big 12 is already crazy, tough, but adding Gonzaga is only going to make it a little bit tougher. And to go along with that, I know we're here on the basketball side, but I failed to mention on the Iowa State preview, I meant to, and failed to mention that the Big 12, renegotiating their television rights deal with ESPN and Fox. So they're staying with the same companies they have been with, just renegotiating for, when Texas and Oklahoma leaves. And it looks like the money's going to be similar despite them leaving and stuff when the new other 4 schools are added to, form the 12 that will be there in 2024 or 2025, whichever year that is, that this will start. So definitely wanted to bring that up and mention that for those of you that hadn't heard about that as well. I'm sure most of you have by now, but definitely that's just the 2 talking points I wanted to talk about. Big 12 TV deal continuing with Fox and ESPN, because I failed to bring that up on the football podcast, the Iowa State preview, which if you haven't checked that out, that released earlier today. Be sure and check out the football side of the Country Roads webcast, season 5, episode 145, the Iowa State preview and predictions episode. Stephen and I just released that. So check that out. We'll have plenty more CRW Hoops content coming in the future as well. But as Silas says here in the comments, your Mark doing work. Yeah, Brett, your Mark certainly is doing work. As I said, meeting with Gonzaga of AD, and I think Mark Few, I think, was the report. But definitely it's going to be very interesting to have Gonzaga in the Big 12 and see what the Big 12 is doing basketball-wise. Didn't even think about, the basketball side potentially adding more new members. I guess just because Texas and Oklahoma leaving, I thought the conference was still going to be very tough, so I never really thought about it on that side. But adding Gonzaga, that's a heck of a way to replace those teams. So it's going to be interesting to see here in the next few years how this Big 12 conference looks and moves going forward. And you want to get, into a place where you're in a good spot. So the West Virginia Mountaineers could use a bounce back season this year in 2022, 2023. I know we all hated to see them, miss the tournament, 2 of the last 3 years or whatever it's been. And, last season struggled. And this season, I think a lot of people are, I don't want to say not hopeful, but you see the Big 12 media poll come out for basketball, and West Virginia's predicted, 9th out of 10 teams. That may get you down a little bit, but that's why I kind of want to go through this roster and show you that West Virginia does have, some players. And I think they have some players that Bob Huggins really likes. He seems to be really happy with this roster. We heard him before down on the transfer portal, and I think that's because like I said, they kind of missed on some of these guys. They went to lower level schools. This time they decided to go the Power 5 route. I think they got guys that are better fits. And Huggins has, come out and said he actually likes the transfer portal now even. So can't be dismissive of that enough that Huggins actually, has come out and said that he really likes this roster. And I think just watching this team and the, scrimmage that we've got to see and the other scrimmage that we got to hear about against Dayton, they definitely have the looks and the makings of more of a Bob Huggins team. They look like his type of guys. They all have a, little bit of an edge to them, the Waggies, the Toussaints, the Eric Stevensons. Those guys really seem like they fit Huggins' style and, fit this culture, this blue-collar style that we like here. That mountaineer mentality, if you will, here at West Virginia. So I'm really quietly optimistic about this season. I know the Mountaineers, like I said, tough non-conference, especially with that preseason tournament they're going to be playing in. And the Big 12, as I said before, I think is the toughest conference in basketball. So they got a tough challenge, but I think that they are set for a bounce-back year, in my opinion. I think that this has the makings of a team that I think they're going to be wrong in the Big 12 media poll. I think that they will not finish 9th. I think you're looking at a team that's more middle of the conference. I could see them even, creeping up into the top 5. I'm thinking 5th, 6th range. But if you finish, 6th in this conference, which is kind of probably where I'd peg them right now, you're probably making the NCAA tournament. And that's, I think, what the ultimate goal is for us this season, or should be anyways, as Mountaineer fans, is to see the West Virginia Mountaineers men's basketball team back into the big dance so we can, write them in our brackets in March. We want to be able to do that, to have that opportunity. And I think that's the ultimate goal of any, college basketball season to me, is to just see your team make the tournament, because then, you have a chance. You only got to win, what, 4 games in a row to get to the Final Four, and, 5, 6 games in a row to win it all. So I think it gives you that, that confidence, that hope. We could win. We could go on a 5, 6 game winning streak. We could do this. And so that, to me, that's just the excitement of college basketball season, is seeing your team make it to the big dance. And that's, I guess, my bold prediction for episode 1 here in the 2022-2023 season preview, is that I think this Mountaineer basketball team will finish better than they're predicted at 9th in the conference. I think they'll improve on that. And I also will predict that this year's team will be an NCAA tournament team. I know it's crazy to say before they've ever, touched the floor in a real game yet, but hey, you gotta have some fun speculation in the season preview episode, and wanted to give you guys a little something there. So that's my bold prediction here in episode 1. But really appreciate you guys tuning in here for episode 1 of the CRW Hoops Pod 2022-2023 season preview edition. Like I said, if you're watching on the video side, whether it be on our YouTube here on the Country Roads Webcast, or over on the WV Sports Now YouTube, where you can find us there, and on their website there at WVSportsNow.com, as we are a part of their network there in the Sports Now family and network. So I'm really appreciative of them. But if you're tuned in to that video version or the video version here on our YouTube, hit the like button while you're in here. Give us that thumbs up. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation, as does hitting the subscribe button. And if you hit that and then hit the notification bell right beside that subscribe button, it'll notify you when we go live for impromptu times when we do like to record episodes of the podcast live, which I am doing here. I am live on the Country Roads Webcast, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, but the playback will be up on our channel and the WV Sports Now channel, as I said. And of course, the audio version will be available on all podcast platforms, as will all of our CRW Hoops episodes throughout this season. So if you're an audio only type of guy, don't worry, we got you covered there as well. But hey, if you like some video stuff, if you're on YouTube ever, hop on over to the Country Roads Webcast channel, subscribe us up there if you're hearing the audio version. So you get a little bit of bonus content there, some stuff you don't get with these long form podcast episodes. Like I said, sometimes we do exclusive to YouTube streams where we don't take the audio and put it on the podcast platform. But you're hearing this now, so you're covered, and you're covered for most of the basketball episodes throughout the season, and at least 2 football episodes as well. So plenty of Mountaineer sports content coming from us here at the Country Roads Webcast. We'll have plenty of hoops coverage. As I said, the plan is to hopefully do live streams for most every game this season that we can, and then of course 1 episode a week here on the podcast side that will be video version up on our YouTube, the WV Sports Now YouTube, and WVSportsNow.com website, and then the audio version, of course, on any podcast platform you like. We'll be back next week with another episode. Who knows? We may try and get one out even before the first game there against Mount St. Mary's, but if not, look out for a post-game reaction stream and then an episode following that game. We'll definitely get one in before the basket brawl, if you will, there, the backyard brawl basketball version coming up. So hoping for an exciting 2022-2023 West Virginia Mountaineer men's basketball season, and we'll be here to cover it all along the way. Like I said, I'm your host for this episode, Jordan. Normally, Steven will be here in this chair, and I'll be here as his sidekick, but for now, you got me for this episode. Have us both in the future, and who knows who else may pop up here as a member of the Country Roads Webcast team as we go throughout the Mountaineer basketball season. But, plenty of coverage coming up on the YouTube channel and here on the podcast side, whether you like the audio or the video. Both Mountaineer sports about to be in full swing with football and basketball, in that time where they are both coexisting. So a lot of content coming up. Be on the lookout for it moving forward. That being said, until next time, let's go Mountaineers.